Hello everyone, today's video is all about VAT on land, specifically a call to action announced by HMRC a couple of days ago on the 12th of May, calling for evidence around taxpayers who have to deal with the sale and purchase of land and buildings and the complex rules surrounding VAT thereon. So the basic rule for VAT when it comes to land is that land and buildings, the sale is exempt from VAT. That's the default position. It's exempt. However, that is subject to exceptions. And when the rules were first brought in, there were only 4 exceptions to the basic rule. Now there are 15 exceptions to the exemption and 26 sets of notes. So it's a bit of a minefield. So the Office of Tax Simplification had a look at this, and they've basically thrown this back to the government saying, look, it's complicated. VAT on property, particularly around this the default exemption and when it turns from being exempt to taxable. Rules are a minefield. Let's see what the public think. Let's throw it out there. So the government have released this consultation, specifically around that option to tax. And I've done separate videos on options to tax. So this is where you start off with the default position of the transaction being exempt from VAT, but then you elect to opt to tax. So in other words, you tick a box that says, yes, it's exempt, but I will treat it as if it's taxable, in a nutshell, which means that you can, charge VAT, claim VAT back, and so on. So that is what the option to tax means. Now, that throws up all sorts of headaches for businesses and individuals, has done for many, many years, particularly when you've got a property and you're the buyer of a property and you don't know if the seller has opted to tax the building. So the price that you've agreed, is that with or without VAT? There's no sort of central database where you could readily go on and find out. So you'd have to get all sorts of documentary evidence from the seller and all, bit of a nightmare. And then following on, if you're the buyer, you've bought this property and we've established, let's say, that the seller has opted to tax the building, so they've charged you VAT, and you claim the VAT back on your next VAT return, and then you start to charge VAT on supplies of the building, which is quite common, if there's tenants in there, but without opting to tax your interest in the building, because many people assume that the interest, when it's opted to tax, it applies to the building. It doesn't. It applies to the owner of the building, the person who has the interest in the building. So when you acquired it, the seller's interest ceases, and you have to register your own option to tax if you want to make taxable supplies, and many people forget. So it's a bit of a minefield. So the Office of Tax Simplification had a look at this a few years ago and rejected several options, but they've thrown them back out into the public domain, which is interesting to say, what does the general public think of this? So let's have a look at these 3 ideas to change the system. So option A would be to remove the ability to opt the building and the land and making all relevant transactions exempt. So this says, look, this basically says you just stick with the default position. All supplies of land and buildings are exempt from VAT, and there's no choice to opt to tax some of them. Everything's just exempt. However, now normally the reason you'd want to opt in the first place is you can claim the VAT back on the expenditure. Now, in this case, what would happen is construction services, that would still remain standard rated. So if you're a property owning taxpayer and you cannot opt the supply of the land and buildings, then that VAT becomes a cost that you cannot recover, that you're charged from whoever's constructing the contractor. So that is, you are out of pocket basically. So yes, it might simplify things in terms of not having to go through you don't even have a choice to opt to tax. The default position is everything's exempt, but then a lot of people will suffer on that, what we call irrecoverable VAT. So that was ruled out. But like I said, these things have been put back out there to see what people think. The second idea that the Office of Tax Simplification had a look at was remove the option to tax and make all land and property taxable at a reduced rate. So that means the default position goes from everything being VAT free, but then you have to elect for some of it to be VATable, to everything is VATable from day one, but at a reduced rate. So say that reduced rate is 5%, which is in various areas in the VAT world, there is this reduced rate of 5%. So, but the sting in this tale, which is not good, is that this option is removing the option to tax and making all land and property taxable, but at a reduced rate, not just commercial. So this would potentially mean resi, and the tax treatment, the VAT treatment on residential property, VAT on new build homes, 0%. Consumer, the buyer of the homes, doesn't suffer any VAT, but because it's zero rated, crucially the developer can claim the VAT back on the costs. Now, if all of a sudden that supply of the new home was at a reduced VAT rate, that would mean that there's an extra 5% on the cost price of the home that you are buying. That if you're buying a new home, that means that it'll cost you 5% VAT, when otherwise it would have cost you 0% VAT. So that's not a great idea, and the Office of Tax Simplification rejected that one as well. But again, they've thrown it back in the public domain into this consultation. So it'll be interesting to see what people think of that. Now, obviously, you've got people, property developers, and you've got buyers and the general public who buy their products. So I suspect there'll be a range of views here, but certainly from the public buyer's point of view, buying homes, an extra 5%. Don't like the sound of that. And then the third option that they'd considered and ruled out, but they're asking your opinion on, is what if you make all commercial land and property taxable at the standard rate with an option to exempt? So that's in effect the kind of the opposite of what there is now, because now you've got the default position is everything is exempt, but you can opt to tax some commercial interests in land. But what this is saying is actually, let's start with everything taxable at the standard rate, and you can opt out and make it exempt. It's a bit, analogy would be pensions and the auto-enrollment, the fact that everyone is opted in unless you opt out. It's not that everyone's out and you have to opt in, if you see what I mean. It's the reverse. So this is what they're suggesting on the VAT is the third option, as it were, to make all commercial VAT just a default standard rated, and then if you want you can opt out and make it exempt. So not starting exempt and opting in. So they are the three main questions being posed there, and it's some interesting ideas. Like I said, Office of Tax Simplification ruled all three of them out, but interesting how the government have said, let's just see what the wider public think. So there you go. This consultation is open until the 3rd of August. Anyone at all can write to HMRC and give their opinions on this. If you are in the property game, if you're a house builder, a developer of commercial property, but even if you're a house buyer like me and millions of other people, you've got an interest in this, particularly option B. God forbid they go down that route and start adding 5% to the price of homes. Then that's not a good thing. But listen, that's one of the options in this consultation. So go and have a look, go and read it. Gov.uk, of course, and just type in the VAT exemption consultation. So yeah, but I can see why they've said it. It's basically the Office of Tax Simplification, which you'll recall was a government spin-off set up to address the complexities of the UK tax system, which is one of the most complex in the world. I think there's only the USA and India that actually have more pages to their tax code than we do. But it's like I said, when it first came out, the VAT treatment of land and property, that default exemption with 4 exceptions to the exemption is now ballooned into 15 exceptions with 26 notes, and it is far too complicated. So this is a good thing that they're trying to simplify it. But how can you simplify it really when they've like I said, they've looked at these three options, and they themselves, the Office of Tax Simplification, come to the conclusion that those three wouldn't work. But I don't know. Maybe you may agree with them and say, one of those could be good. That certainly, I think the last one, the default of making every commercial property taxable at the standard rates, but then you can elect to opt out, that could have legs, because it's just the flip side of what happens now, but the only difference being that it would be less administratively burdensome. So who knows what the public will come up with. HMRC do tend to take people's considerations when they have these consultations. They don't just pay lip service and just, they do go through them and address them, and so yeah, it'll be interesting to see what people respond to with regards to this consultation on the UK's VAT exemption rules. So if you like this video, do subscribe right there, and as always, I'll see you soon.